Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Doctors Brooke and Lynn. I'm Dr. Brooke.
I'm Dr. Lynn.
Thank you for joining us again this week, ladies. We've got a great topic of conversation. Tell them what it is.
Yeah, so most of us in this phase of life have bigger kids. So
Yes.
we're talking about bigger kids, bigger problems.
Yes. Let me tell you, and I did a post about this a while back that so many people chimed in on that, like, sometimes I wish I could go back to the days that all I had to worry about was whether or not my kid was going to learn to pee on the potty. And, you know, you're in that phase of life. And when you're in the thick of that, it all feels so big. And for some reason I had in mind, like, oh, my kids are going to grow up and they're going to leave home. They're going to go to college or they're going to do la, la, la. And all of a sudden the parenting stress is going to stop and I'm going to sail into the sunset, live my happiest life. And turns out we never stopped parenting them. Newsflash. And you're all probably listening going, yeah, no crap, Dr. Brooke. But it really hit me like, and I'll share a little bit of a conversation I had with my oldest son who's in college when he called. Like, every mother's like, oh my gosh, when they call and like, mom, and they're struggling with something out of the home. And it's like, I realized in those moments, we'd never stop parenting. No. And very often, like, I'm seeing these bigger kids or bigger problems because now it's like existential stuff. It's like the big things, not just the like, you know, he's got to go to bed or how's he going to learn to sleep by himself or how's he, you know, all this.
Yeah.
So anyway,
back to your point, nobody tells you that the hardest part of motherhood is when they grow up.
Right.
We thought we had it hard when they were little and we did. It was busy.
Right. It was exhausting.
And exhausting.
Like physically exhausting.
Yes.
This now is like
no
sleep. Can be emotionally exhausting. This part.
That's perfect way to put it.
And how many women have spoken to the posts that you have done talking about how hard it is to watch your kids struggle? This is the thing. We're talking about bigger kids, bigger problems, and like having to let them go through that because now this is the other thing. They're at an age where we can't shelter, like we can't. When they were little, it was easier to protect them and come alongside them and not let them feel those hurts. Now they're going out on their own, and guess what? We can't
control it.
No, and it's probably a good thing to not control that because that's, once we say this for ourselves, we grow in the struggle. So do our kids.
Yeah, and we know that rationally, but still watching them go through that, it's excruciating.
Oh,
right. And that could be something what we perceive as a little struggle, like in the big realm of things, like, are you healthy? Are you happy?
Right.
You know, but you're still struggling with something. And it could be, I mean, my heart goes out to moms who've had to deal with something very real with their child, you know, like addiction or illness or what have you. So,
and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I don't, you know, it's easy for us to talk. We are privileged in the fact that the things that we're dealing with, they are big for some moms wish those were the things they were dealing with. So we can't lose sight of that too.
Yes.
So for anyone that's got the really
grateful. Be grateful for the problems that you have, but it doesn't mean they're not valid. We shouldn't discuss them and also be better, like learning to be better parents and better guiders and, you know, having some wisdom through this phase. So everybody, all of these situations are valid no matter what your kid is going through. So.
And by the way, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I would like to say one more thing. And I think this applied a lot like through high school, but even as our kids get older, like with the mom friends that you have, please don't judge other moms and think like,
okay,
they did something. What's wrong?
Nope. I'm going to stop you there.
Why?
One of my pet peeves, and if you have this shirt, it's like, be kind, right? Yes, this is such a good thing to be kind, but we can't control other people.
Yes.
We have to be the people that don't judge other people.
Yes. That's what I was trying. That's what I was getting at is like,
then I agree with you.
Where did you think I was going with that?
I don't know.
To a bad place or something? That
No, I thought we were, you know, basically when you point a finger, there's 4 fingers back at you, pointing at you, right?
Remove the plank from your own eye first. But what I was going to say, like you brought up the example of addiction. So it could be that, it could be anything. It could be your, I don't know, the kids, whatever it is, whatever it is, don't judge the other mom because we can do our very best and our kids can still screw up. And until you've walked in somebody else's shoes, you don't know what that's like. like I used to say that when the kids were in high school, because some, kids get in trouble, they do stupid things. Don't judge the parents. I mean, sometimes maybe a parent is falling short, but I'm saying like you don't know, like all it takes is one bad decision, and no child is infallible. No parent is infallible. Every kid is going to screw up. So instead of judging each other, pointing the finger, like you said, let's like come alongside each other and reach out when a mom is struggling or their child's struggling, right? Like, what can I do to help, or how, do you need an ear, whatever that is.
Yeah. I think we have a tendency to like problem rank, right? So like, okay, well, her problem is that's so much harder than what I'm dealing with. But to your point, I think what you're saying is like everybody's struggle is valid, and we just need to have non-judgment and help them to see the good points from it. If somebody's really focused on only the bad, and in the grander scheme of things, their problem is solvable, help them to stay positive, but also empathize with whatever it is.
Yes, I think that's what I was getting at. Just that, right. Yeah. So I went on a little tangent.
That's okay.
Bring us
back to the bigger kids.
Yeah.
So I think at the heart of this, because what we're talking about is standing back, right? And so just the context of that, the connotation of standing back and letting them do it, letting go of the reins. It's a surrender. It's a letting go. And very often in life, if you look at that, we have to surrender. We have to let go in so many areas. And when we do, we get some of our biggest breakthroughs by doing that. But it's that time where we've got to just do that, that is the hardest. And that's the time we're in. So that's what we're talking about, this space where it's not quite an empty nest. It is an empty nest, and the time after, right?
Right.
And my point is, it's very often about control. So when they were in our house, when they were, even if it was something out of our control, like a friend drama or something, we still knew that they were coming home every night.
Right.
And we could help them take action steps and intervene.
Right.
To help them.
Yes.
And at this stage, it's, I think we're what we're actually grappling with, because hopefully our adults are they have to make their way at the end of the day.
Right.
But what we're actually grappling with is the loss of control that we no longer have.
Well, and also, yes, 100%.
So it's harder on the mother physically and emotionally than even the child. I know you're going to tell a story a little bit about Anthony. And I mean, he's forgotten about that now. I mean, I think it was pretty formative for him, but
yes, well, that, to your point, yes, you're right. We hold on to this and it's like, oh my gosh, how's it gonna, like, what's gonna happen? You're so stressed out. And then 2 days later, your kid's like, yeah, it's great. So like there's that. But I think that here's the thing. And I think we've mentioned this in other podcasts. When your child's older and they're away, they're not living in your home, and they call you with a problem, and it's a really big deal for them. How are you handling it now? Because you can't tell them what to do. I mean, you can, but it's probably not going to be well received.
It doesn't help them problem solve either.
No, it doesn't help them figure it out. You also want to be more of a listening ear than telling them what to do or scolding them, because you want them to come back and talk to you again. And if you don't lead with, sometimes they just need you to listen.
Yeah.
Right? And not parent, but be the friend and be the listener. But how can you have a constructive conversation with them and parent them without telling them exactly what to do, but also trying to help them get to the place where they need to be?
Yeah.
And that's a really, really tricky thing.
Yeah.
It's a really tricky thing.
But it all comes down to communication, doesn't it?
100%.
Right? And when they're not in your house, you do have a little bit of control. So we always talk about stay in the place where you can control. We can't control their actions and their behaviors to the same extent, but we do have control, or some control, over the communication that we keep with them.
Yes.
And so I love that you brought that up, because I have right here that relationship has shifted, but we have to work to keep that communication open, because we're not in control. We need to foster that relationship and nurture that communication with them so that they don't shut down and keep us out, because that is a scary place to be, where it's happening and you don't know about it. I mean, I guess it's a blessing and a curse.
Yes. And here's the other thing, when they're older and they're out of the house and they call you, or you, if you're face to face, whatever it is, and they're struggling with something and you think you know what's best, right? Like when Anthony called me, I wanted to tell him exactly what to do. But I also had to take a step back because A, he's 20 years old. So he's got to figure things out. I can help him along and talk him through it and help him process it. But B, if I told him what to do and he did it simply because there's still that parent child role and it ended up being the wrong thing, that's not going back on him and it being his decision. Even though he made the decision, it could come back like, well, you told me to do that, right? So you can't, do you know what I'm saying?
I do, and it's disempowering.
It is, and we're at a stage in our life where we can't live their life for them.
No.
And and that was part of the conversation that I had with Anthony, and it was a letting go, which is hard. And I think you mentioned that earlier, was like, Anthony, let's talk through this. But here's the deal. You're 20 years old. You're about to be 21. You're an adult. You're living your own life. You need to let go of what you think I want for you, or what your dad wants, or because he can be like a want to please, not necessarily people, but he likes to perform. Like he's a performer and he's done that for like what makes, that he holds. We have a good relationship with him. So he has respect for our opinion of him. And I had to say to him, you need to start to figure out not what makes mom happy, not what makes dad happy, but what is going to make Anthony happy. And
great.
You need to know that whatever choice you make in your life from here on out, even if it's something I completely disagree with, even if you fall flat on your face, even if you screw up, at the end of the day, we are always going to love you and we will never stop loving you. And I think that's such an important thing. It's a scary thing to say. Like you have to figure out what's best for you.
If they do fail, you have to
still
back it up.
Right. Yep. Because and it was a big thing that we were talking about. And meanwhile, I'm on the inside going,
yeah,
if he takes this other path, like I've got to your point, like I've got to be okay with that. But
yeah, I mean, it goes back to, it's less about, so it used to be, okay, like when you were teaching them to tie their shoelaces, here's what you do. And then it's this step. It's less about telling them how to do it and more about asking them the questions, prompting them with the right questions
and
at the right time. So it comes back to that Socratic method and just asking your kids better questions. Because I remember going back, when you're this age too, something to keep in mind is you have an ego about you becoming an adult. So you're a little bit immature in the sense, right? We know this about our kids. They don't know everything, but they kind of think they do, right? Yes. Because that's just how 20 somethings are, right?
Yes.
To a certain extent. And everybody's a little different with it, but you cannot, in my experience, you cannot come at them that way, because that insults their ego about making decisions, right?
It can close the door, and it can close their ears
down. So instead, your default is to tell them, instead of that, start asking them really great questions like, okay, well, what results are you looking for?
Mm-hmm.
What are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
Different things like that. And here's my other piece to this with the communication side and continuing to foster and nurture that. They are now going to potentially start giving you advice. All right. If you want to shut down your child as they get a little bit stronger on those adult legs, the worst thing you can do would be to not listen, or to, I'm the parent, and why do you, be open, have some open ears. There's probably some advice that's, I think, pretty cool as we start to see that they're getting out and getting their own experience. They're going to share some things back with us that would be good advice for us. And how empowering would that be? Right? You could look at it as in like, I'm going to lose my authority. I mean, they're going to lose respect for me. Or you could see it as you're giving them confidence because now somebody they really respect is actually taking their advice.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. It can go, that's having your kids tell, that's a big thing. It's funny, the dynamic that changes, like you're still the parent, but the conversations are meatier and there's more to unpack with them. And it's kind of interesting to watch that unfold.
Yeah. And I think they can keep you young. Like, like
Absolutely.
just, it's a give and take, but
Absolutely.
but it all comes back to communication.
It 100% comes back to communication. And that's what sort of I played out with Anthony, was just helping him tease it out and helping him process that. And part of the conversation as well, and we just talked about this in the previous last episode about taking risks, right? And I had the conversation with him there was like, Anthony, you have to determine what's going to make you happy. And then, as I just shared, and at the end of the day, whatever it is that makes you happy, like only you can decide that. Like your level of success, like it can't be based on what we want or what we think is best, right? But the answer to your happiness is also not taking the easy way out. Right? You might want to use the guise of, well, it's harder, it's more work, and that's not going to I'm not happy doing the work. That's not the answer either.
It's short-term happiness versus long-term happiness. In the short term, you might be happy if you quit quit the work.
Yes.
But in the long term, what is the what's the implication?
And I had the conversation with him that we had earlier, which was like, you don't want to get to a place in your life where you look back and say, what if?
Yeah.
Or regret the work that you left on the table, or regret the risk that you didn't take.
So good.
So, you got to sometimes push yourself. And in that conversation, the piece to happiness was like, at the end of the day, for me, and I try to speak this over my kids, what I want for you is not for you to have the best job or the most money or the coolest lifestyle or the most success on the lacrosse field. What I want for you most is for you to be happy with whatever it is that you're doing.
Love it.
But you need to decide that, but you also need to be aware that like sometimes the hard thing, like you said, in the short term, it looks like it's not making you happy, but the long-term gains, and that's a big deal for kids.
That's a struggle for people in general, not just kids, to get to the fact it's not the tangible result. It's not the money. It's not the thing, the car, the fancy job. It's the work, the determination, the character building, the struggle that it took to get to that thing that actually creates the confidence that makes you happy. So that's in the space where the kids are in college, and then they grow up and they get married. And then it gets even again, as just when you think it's getting easier, then we're bringing new people into our family, which how cool is that, by the way?
It's super cool.
And thinking about that, keep that in mind, if you're not in that place, or you couldn't even start thinking about grandkids, but that is coming for you, and it possibly. And that's a cool place, to dream about. But we had a great question from Deborah.
Yeah, good segue.
And, it actually something
Deborah
getting ready to record this. And she asked this weekend, and we thought, we've got to work this into this subject, because it really goes hand in hand. So we're talking about kids that get married, and her question, if you want to summarize it for us.
Yeah. So essentially, I think it was maybe a little bit around the holidays, sort of, but what happened, essentially what it was, she had two boys, three boys. Two of them got married within like 11 months of each other. And prior to them being married, she felt super close to her now daughter-in-laws, like had great relationships with them. And she was coming at it from a history of having a really poor relationship with her own mother-in-law. So she wanted to do better, and things were great. She kept open communication. And this was not like Deborah like whining at us. She seemed like kudos to you, Deborah, because you seem very self-aware, right? But her concern was, she felt like since the kids got married, that the daughter-in-laws took a little bit of a step back. Like it was almost like they had to do less work now because now they had the husband and they didn't have to try so hard. And she was feeling maybe a little angst around that. Yeah. And I think it wasn't that it was a bad thing now, but what it seemed to me was she was concerned that it was just a stepping stone to what could potentially be worse in the future.
Yes.
And she just wanted to nip it in the bud while she could.
Yeah. Which is,
did I summarize that well?
Yeah. I think you did great service to that. And so, we have a married son.
Yeah. So you've been
married for almost 10 years, and the relationship does change, going back 10 years. I can't really remember what it was like beforehand, but I can empathize with the change of what happens. And then even more so when the kids come, because obviously they're in that space where it's very busy and they just don't have the leftover time. I guess my advice is it's because it's trickier with boys, right? Sometimes because girls are very traditionally very attached to their side, their moms and so forth.
Yeah.
And with the moms and the sons, it can definitely be tricky. Let's just say that.
I think I see that more honestly, like in friends that I have that are the kids still, right? Now we're shifting from being the parent to being the kid, but I definitely have friends in my life who complain about the mother-in-law still wanting to be the primary woman in the son's life, like that there's that like push and pull because they still view the son as her baby, and then but he's somebody's husband.
Yes.
I don't hear a lot of men complaining about I don't know. Do you?
I think it's probably,
or sorry, women complaining that I have that
complaining
backwards.
about the wives being too close to their family.
Yes.
Oh, I think that happens. I think the goal, and I think what we have to keep in mind is we want when that child gets married, we have to logically see that is a new family unit being formed. It is the official cleaving of them from your family.
Yeah.
I mean, as abrupt and harsh as that sounds, it's the truth.
Yeah.
Your son's priority now should be to his family.
Sure.
His immediate family. Now, the good news is we live in the modern world, right? So we can still have all these interconnections amongst the families. So we're cool with that. But I do think there's overstepping that happens. So I think we can do better as the mother-in-law by not overstepping, by empathizing with and getting to know our daughter-in-law as a person and not having an expectation for her. I think we disappoint ourselves when we have an expectation. So I think we can be most helpful for you, Deborah, if you're listening, is that probably what's going on is you entered into these marriages with an expectation because you had such a hurtful relationship on your side.
That's what I was thinking.
You entered into this with an expectation that it was going to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
You were hopeful for it.
Yes.
You were not wrong in having that.
Right.
But because it's the two sides and it is I think what you need to do is maybe lower the expectation and just love what is. Learn to love what is there. What is right about the relationship. Maybe you don't see each other every single week, but you get together and they, ask when there is a crisis or something. How wonderful is that they're coming to you when something is really going wrong? That means they trust you, right? What can you find in what is happening that is right? And I think just give that time and patience to grow. Try to check your hurt, because as soon as you project your hurt and your rejection onto them, it's going to backfire on you.
Yeah. And
in the meantime, you need to busy yourself, build up your life outside of that, and be a fun person, a well-rounded person, a fulfilled person who would attract other people to spend time, so that hopefully your kids will love coming to your house and love spending time with you. And I hope you see that subtle difference. It's not about just like caving in and giving into their whim and just like rolling over and not being a mom.
Right.
It's not that. It's about just not having that expectation.
It's not bribing.
Right. It's not, because that's not going to work.
No.
And they're not going to respect you. You want to keep respect.
And eventually you're going to probably, if you're doing that, like bribing with, oh, let me do all this stuff for you, you're going to become resentful.
That's going to get out of exchange. Exactly. Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're giving something expecting a return.
Right.
And moms, unfortunately, we're as we just said, we're supposed to give for life. That's just that comes with the job description.
Right.
So we may not always get back what we give.
Right.
And, but I like to think that things do balance themselves out in the law of reciprocity. If you give without an expectation of getting something back, they're going to acknowledge you. If they're good people and you've done a good job, they're going to come back. It's going to work out eventually.
If you're pouring into your relationship with your daughter-in-laws, that's so good. Just because you want a good relationship, not because you're worried about having your son in your life or you want to see them more, or you're worried if they have grandkids down the road, just because you're doing it out of kindness and not expecting a return.
Yeah.
Because we all see through the, like, when you're doing it to get something back,
Yep.
right? And that doesn't bode well for anyone. And it didn't strike me in the message that that was the case here at all.
No.
I would guess, and I think to your point, and you said this, we set these ideals, and an ideal is an ideal for a reason, because you're not going to reach it. And I think in this case, like, letting go of, like, you're not your mother-in-law, and just because you had a poor relationship with her doesn't mean that the same is going to happen to
Right.
you. And if you put that stress on the relationship, and I think that if you make the mistake of having too many conversations with the daughter-in-law or with your sons about it, that's probably going to
Again,
create
could
stress too,
backfire.
even though you're trying to keep the lines of communication open and just making sure everything's okay.
Yep.
It
It's basically acting out of fear
Yeah,
to trying to prevent something versus actually fostering, like, work, operating out of the sense that, like, no, this is, I would like to make this best relationship that I can. Right. There's a subtle difference there.
yes. And again, to your point too, and I think you just mentioned that, is like having a strong sense of yourself and having self-worth, and having a life outside of your kids. This is where this becomes important too, because now, the ball's a little more in your court, and you're
Yep.
not like needing them to come to you to be fulfilled, because you're fulfilled with the life that you have going on, and it's icing on the cake to spend time with them.
Yes.
But it's not like, you're
A
operating from a
needy
point of
situation.
abundance instead of lack.
Yes.
And if you put all your eggs in the basket of, like, I'm only going to be fulfilled in this phase of life if my kids are around, and, I'm in their life all the time, you're setting yourself up for, and I'm not speaking to you if you're listening, Deborah, specifically, because I didn't catch that you were, I'm
No.
just saying that in general.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, I think you're right on track, Deborah, because the way that you described your situation was just one of, like, unfortunately, it's just one of those, can we just cop to, this is just a tricky
It is.
situation to navigate. It sounds like you're doing a great job. I would just basically our advice is keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
But come at it with the awareness that, you know, it can't be that expectation. You can't have too high of a standard for what it should look like.
Yes.
Get to know them
Yes.
as people, pour into them as people that love your son,
Right.
as you would pouring into your son.
Yeah.
And then step back and watch the results of that, the fruit of that, just over time, because it's going to take time to build that.
Absolutely.
Right? But yeah, it is, I can definitely empathize and tell you that it's and nobody gets it quite perfect.
Yeah.
But when you start with the wanting to do the right thing by your child and by that person, by the way, once they've, hopefully you like them as people, hopefully your son, I mean, I'm sure it gets even trickier when it's somebody that you're so very different from, and maybe you don't have a lot in common. But the same advice applies. Try to find what is right instead of focusing on what's so wrong. Look for the things that are going right, and then be grateful for the ways that that person complements your child. And just,
Yeah.
be thankful and grateful for that.
Yeah, it's so good. And reading her message, what twinged at my heart a little bit, because I have 3 boys. And I've talked about this with your sister, Paula, because she has 2 boys. And it's like, and she's really close to her boys, as I am with mine. Like, we have good relationships. And it's like, it's that stereotypical, like, oh, the boy leaves the mother's house, the parents' house, and goes with, and that's, some of that's old and dated. But I also, have that in my
It's bittersweet for
mind a little bit of, like, what's that going to look like, and how, so, and Anthony has, a very serious girlfriend that he's been with some time, and, we'll see without sharing too much there, but it's like, you do have to take a step back, and, like, as a mom with a son, there's like a special bond there, I think, for a mom and a son. And then to, like, take a step back and say, like, I'm not the most important woman in his life anymore.
Oh.
And to be okay with that.
Yeah.
It's a humbling experience. And, like, to let him, there are things coming up now, like this year, and it'll happen next year. Wasn't planned too soon, but, like, we're always together for holidays. We've always been. And now next year he's saying like they do something special. Her family does something special every year for New Year's. And next year he's like, Mom, it didn't happen this year because I tried to plan it too late. But next year I'm going with my girl. And, there's somebody else in his life. And I've got to be okay with that because he's got to live his life too.
Goes back to what we always say. We don't have control over our circumstances, but we do have control over the way that we react to them.
Yes.
Right. And the way that we see it. And we choose to, what we choose to focus on.
Absolutely. But I can guarantee if I'm guilt tripping him or guilt tripping her or, even passive aggressively in any way, that's certainly not going to make them want to spend any more time with me. Right. Like you're shooting yourself in the foot when you do that stuff. But I'm also not going to sit around when that holiday comes around and feel sad because he's elsewhere. I'm going to make sure that me and my husband or the rest of the kids while we're here, whatever, have the best dang holiday that we can. And I hope he's having a blast, right? Like
what else
you
could
always
do
have a
in that
choice
situation. Yes.
No, yeah.
I mean, you could do other things, but that I think would be the most sane way to respond to that. Like the easiest, the greatest ease and the most beneficial for everybody involved. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And I just, one other thought that I have,
Yeah, please,
Deborah, for you is like, when it's interesting dance when you're dating someone, because you're sort of putting your best foot forward. Hopefully, it's long enough that and that person's authentic. It's not like it's going to be a total bait and switch.
Right.
But when you do marry, you sort of think about as a wife, okay, well, we're going to settle in and we're going to build our life. Now it's sort of this, I remember those days where you were sort of trying to impress the parents. Okay. It just happens. I mean, just right. Is that, am I the only one?
No.
But as a mom, flip the switch and think about, so you sort of hold them at arm's length until they are married because, well, the way that we grow up, I mean, maybe they would break up and then you don't want to put your child in a weird situation where now they're breaking up two relationships.
Yeah.
They're breaking up their relationship with that woman and then they're having to interfere with your relationship with them because you got so close.
Sure.
So I'm sure Deborah's thinking, okay, we're married. Now we can just be happy and go do all the things, get our hair and nails done and all the fun. And so again, conversations I think are just a great way to just move through some of this and just kind of putting it on the table in a loving way and just say, I'd be very hopeful that we could get together. What sounds good for you? Could you manage once a month? I would love to plan something, for you, like make it convenient for them, something they would like to do and, be involved in that way. But just helping to see each other's sort of side, I think is also helpful in that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. That's great advice. And I love once again, just how self-aware she was about it. And there was no like, cause we do have to be self-aware.
She was just like, I want to make this better. What do you think?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And, and it's okay. Like I think that the point is like so many of us as moms struggle with this stuff, right? As the kids get older and they get married and they move out.
And there's no manual for it.
No, I said that.
Except for we're trying to write one.
Right, exactly.
We're
challenge accepted.
SOP or standard of process for your kids getting married and how to react. No, just kidding. There's not. And every situation is so different, but it does help to talk about it. And
absolutely
in here.
And once again, to know that you're not alone,
and
that most of us are struggling with the same things. Just knowing that is so huge, is so beneficial. So anyway, are we good?
I think so.
Okay.
Thanks, Deborah, for that question. That was great. If you have similar questions, if there's situations, this is great. Chances are you're not the only one dealing with this. So please DM us or email us and maybe we'll be able to break it down for you on a podcast.
Just like we did here with Deborah. Yeah. Don't hesitate to DM if you've got something going on. We love, this is like, for me with Life After Kids, like the biggest thing that I love about is the community and the connection. So if we can connect with you guys via the podcast or any other way, I think that's always a good thing. So, and if you're struggling with it, likely somebody else is too. So we're all helping each other here. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. for another episode of the podcast. We hope you found what we talked about today beneficial, and make sure you're following us on all of our pages, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can find us also on our private Facebook group. If you want to watch this episode instead of listen, you can find us on YouTube. And make sure you're checking out the website as well, www.lifeafterkids.com. Have an awesome week.
Yes.
Take care of yourself. Be an amazing mom and an amazing person.
Hugs to you.